I still remember the way my palms sweated that day. The certificate felt heavy in my hands, heavier than paper should feel. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, parents shifting in their seats, students whispering as Principal Davis approached. The microphone. I was 12 years old, sitting between my parents in the third row, my navy blue dress carefully ironed that morning, my hair in freshly done braids that my mother had stayed up late to perfect. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, Principal Davis announced, his voice booming through the speakers. The winner of this year's statewide mathematics competition, representing Jefferson Middle School. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew the answer. I had the proof right there in my trembling hands. The official letter from the State Education Board confirming my perfect score, the highest in the district. Allison Porter! The room erupted in applause, but something froze inside me. That wasn't my name. That wasn't me. My father's hand tightened around mine as a thin blonde girl 3 rows ahead stood up, her ponytail bouncing as she practically skipped to the stage. Her parents beamed, her father already on his feet, clapping vigorously. Mrs. Porter, I recognized, her from the PTA meetings, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. That's not right, my mother whispered, her voice low but firm. Zora, show me that letter again. I looked down at the paper in my lap. There it was in black and white. Congratulations to Zora Williams for achieving the highest score in the state mathematics competition. The date, the official seal, the signature of the head examiner. While Allison accepted her trophy, a gleaming cup that caught the stage lights, my father was already on his feet. Come on, he said, his jaw set in that way that told me he wasn't going to let this slide. And that's how it began, the day I learned that sometimes, even when you have the proof right in your hands, the world might still try to tell you that you're wrong. Darana, Jefferson Middle School, sat on a hill overlooking our town like a brick sentinel. I loved that school, with its wide hallways and the smell of books and floor polish. I'd always felt safe there, until that day. My father, Marcus Williams, was not a man who raised his voice often. A civil engineer who believed in precision and facts. He taught me that numbers don't lie, and neither should people. My mother, Diana, taught English literature at the community college and raised me on stories of truth-tellers and justice-seekers. Between them, I grew up believing that truth was something solid you could hold on to. We waited outside Principal Davis's office while Allison and her family finished their congratulatory meeting. I clutched the letter, reading it over and over, wondering if maybe I'd misunderstood something. Mrs. Porter emerged first, her hand on Allison's shoulder, the trophy clutched in her daughter's arms. She glanced at us, her smile faltering for just a second before she guided Allison past us without a word. Mr. Porter followed, his eyes meeting my father's briefly before looking away. Something in that look, a flicker of something that might have been shame, made my stomach twist. Principal Davis appeared in the doorway next, his round face flushed with the excitement of the ceremony. Marcus, Diana, and young Zora, what can I do for you folks today? Wasn't that a wonderful assembly? My father didn't waste time on pleasantries. We need to speak with you privately. Inside his office, Principal Davis settled behind his large mahogany desk. Awards and certificates covered the walls, evidence of Jefferson's academic excellence. I'd always been proud to be part of that. Legacy. Now, what seems to be the problem? He asked, folding his hands on the desk. My father nodded to me, and I stepped forward, placing the letter in front of Principal Davis. My hand shook slightly, but my voice was steady when I spoke. This letter says I had the highest score in the state competition, I said. But you announced Allison as the winner. Principal Davis barely glanced at the paper before pushing it back toward me with a tight smile. There must be some confusion, he said. The results came directly from the state board. Allison scored 98%, the highest in our district's history. With all due respect, my mother said, picking up the letter, this official notification states that Zora scored 100%, a perfect score. Principal Davis's smile didn't waver, but something hardened in his eyes. Impossible. We've never had a student achieve a perfect score. The test is designed to always leave room for error. Well, you have one now, my father said. My daughter. The principal sighed, leaning back in his chair. Look, these competitions can be complicated. Sometimes there are other factors to consider. Allison has been training for this for years. Her parents have invested considerably in her education. And we haven't. My mother's voice was quiet, but had an edge I rarely heard. That's not what I meant, Principal Davis backpedaled. It's just that Allison she's our math team captain. She's expected to go on to nationals. The school's reputation is built on honesty, I would hope, my father interrupted. Or is it built on something else? The implication hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Principal Davis's face flushed. I don't appreciate what you're suggesting, Mr. Williams. My father stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. We're not suggesting anything. We're showing you evidence. My daughter earned that recognition, and we expect the school to acknowledge that. I'll look into it, Principal Davis said finally. But I wouldn't get your hopes up. The ceremony is over. The announcements have been made. Changing things now would be complicated. As we left his office, I felt something shift inside me. Like the ground I thought was solid had suddenly revealed itself to be thin ice. He's not going to do anything, is he? I asked as we walked to the car. My mother exchanged a look with my father. Don't worry, baby. This isn't over. The next day at school was worse than I'd imagined. Word had somehow spread that my parents had complained about Allison's win. In the hallways, students whispered as I passed. In the cafeteria, spaces emptied when I approached. Allison herself avoided me entirely, surrounded by her usual group of friends who shot me cold glances whenever our paths crossed. Ms. Jenkins, my math teacher, and the person who had encouraged me to enter the competition in the first place, caught me after class. Zora, can we talk? I nodded, staying behind as the other students filed out. Ms. Jenkins was young compared to most teachers, with dark-rimmed glasses and a perpetual coffee mug in hand. She'd always treated me differently than other teachers, pushing me harder, expecting more. I heard about what happened at the assembly, she said, perching on the edge of her desk. I have the letter, I said immediately, reaching for my backpack. I can show you. I believe you, she interrupted. I knew something was off when they announced the scores. I was on the proctoring committee. I saw your test, Zora. It was flawless. Relief washed over me. Then why? Politics, she said, simply. School politics, district politics. It's all tangled up. The Porters donate a lot of money to the school. Mr. Porter is on the Board of Education. And Allison, she hesitated. Allison fits a certain image the school likes to project. The words hung between us, their meaning clear even to my 12-year-old mind. So what do I do? I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Ms. Jenkins smiled sadly. You keep being brilliant, Zora. And you learn that sometimes in life you have to fight twice as hard for half the recognition. It's not fair, but... She stopped herself. Your parents are doing the right thing. Standing up for what's true. Matters, even when it's hard. I nodded, but as I left the classroom, a heaviness settled in my chest. I'd always believed that excellence would speak for itself, that if I just worked hard enough, was good enough, the rest would follow naturally. Now I was learning that there were other rules to the game that no one had bothered to explain to me. That evening, my parents sat me down at our kitchen table. The warm yellow walls of our home had always been a sanctuary, but even here the situation followed us. We've called the State Education Board, my father said. They're looking into it. And we've requested copies of all the test scores, my mother added. They're public record. I pushed the peas around my plate. Maybe we should just let it go. Everyone at school already thinks I'm just jealous. My parents exchanged glances. Zora, my mother said, setting down her fork. Do you remember the story of Ida B. Wells? I nodded. My mother had read me her biography when I was 9. The journalist who wrote about lynchings even when people threatened her. That's right. And do you know why her work was so important? Because she told the truth when no one else would. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. The truth matters, Zora. Always. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it costs you something. Your mother's right, my father added. This isn't just about a trophy or a certificate. It's about what's right. And we need to show you that when something isn't right, you don't just accept it. You worked to change it. I thought about that, about Ms. Jenkins' words, about the look on Allison's face when she took that trophy that wasn't really hers. Okay, I said finally. What's next? The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. My parents were relentless, methodical. My father took time off work to drive to the state capitol and speak directly with education officials. My mother drafted letters and made copies of everything. At school, I kept my head down. Allison and I shared 3 classes, and the tension was thick enough to touch. Her friends formed a protective circle around her, as if I might snatch the trophy from her locker at any moment. One day, in the bathroom between classes, I found myself alone with Allison for the first time since the ceremony. She was washing her hands and our eyes met in the mirror. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I worked really hard for that award, she said finally, her voice brittle. So did I replied. My parents expect me to win. They've paid for tutors since I was 7. Do you know what it's like to have that kind of pressure? I didn't answer. I'd never had tutors. My parents helped when they could, but mostly I worked through problems on my own, staying up late with library books and borrowed textbooks. Everyone thinks I cheated now, she continued, her voice cracking slightly. Or that my dad bought the award. Is that what you're telling people? I haven't told anyone anything, I said truthfully. I just know what my score was. Allison turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed. My dad says your family is just causing trouble. That people, like you always want to take credit for. She stopped herself, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air between us. People like me? I repeated, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. She looked away. I didn't mean it like that, but we both knew she did, or at least her father did. And for the first time, I felt something beyond the injustice of the Barrett situation, a deep, aching hurt that cut to the bone. Congratulations on your win, Allison, I said quietly, and left the bathroom without waiting for her response. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because it was raining, the kind of spring downpour that turns the world gray and makes everything seem more dramatic than it is. I came home from school to find my parents at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, and a woman I didn't recognize. She wore a crisp navy suit and had the kind of presence that filled the room. Zora, my mother said, a note of excitement in her voice. This is Ms. Reynolds from the State Department of Education. Ms. Reynolds stood and extended her hand to me. Her handshake was firm, deliberate. It's nice to meet you, Zora. I've heard a lot about you. Ms. Reynolds has been reviewing the test scores, my father explained. All of them. The woman nodded, gesturing for me to join them at the table. What we found was concerning, she said, spreading out several papers. Not just your score, which was indeed a perfect 100, but discrepancies in several other students' scores as well. She showed me a spreadsheet with names and numbers. Mine was at the top. Williams, Zora, 100. Allison's name was several rows down. Porter. Allison, 91. Not 98? I asked, remembering Principal Davis's claim. Not even close, Ms. Reynolds confirmed. And there were other irregularities. Students whose scores were artificially lowered. Students who weren't from certain schools or certain backgrounds. My parents were quiet, letting Ms. Reynolds explain. We believe there was a systematic effort to manipulate the results, she continued. And it's not the first time we've had concerns about this particular competition. Your case just provided the evidence we needed to launch a formal investigation. So, what happens now? I asked. Ms. Reynolds smiled for the first time. Now, we correct the record. The department will be issuing a formal statement tomorrow, acknowledging the true winners of the competition, including you, Zora. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly followed by a new worry. What about Allison? It wasn't her fault. Ms. Reynolds' expression softened. No, it wasn't, and that will be made clear. The responsibility lies with the adults who failed both of you. After she left, my parents hugged me tight. I'm so proud of you, my mother whispered, for standing your ground. We all did it together, I said, and I meant it. Without them, without their unwavering belief that this wrong could be righted, I might have given up, but I also felt a strange hollowness where triumph should have been. Winning back what should have been mine in the first place didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhaustion. The next day, Principal Davis called an emergency assembly. The student body filed into the auditorium, confusion and curiosity buzzing through the crowd. I sat with my parents again, this time in the far back row. Ms. Reynolds stood on stage alongside Principal Davis, whose usual confident demeanor had been replaced by something more subdued. Allison and her parents were noticeably absent. "Students and faculty," Principal Davis began, his voice lacking its usual resonance. "I've called you here today to address a serious matter concerning our recent mathematics competition." He went on to explain, in careful terms, that errors had been discovered in the scoring process, that the State Department had conducted a review, that corrections would be made. Ms. Reynolds stepped forward then, taking over with a clear, steady voice. "Academic integrity is the foundation of our educational system," she said. "When that integrity is compromised, we all lose." She explained the investigation's findings without naming names or pointing fingers, but everyone knew. In a school like Jefferson, news traveled fast. "Therefore," she concluded, "it is my honor to recognize the true winner of the state mathematics competition, Zora Williams, with the first perfect score in the competition's 20-year history." The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew stronger. I felt hundreds of eyes turned toward me, some curious, some embarrassed, some genuinely happy. Ms. Reynolds beckoned me to the stage. My legs felt like lead as I made my way to the front of the auditorium. My father squeezed my shoulder as I passed him. On stage, Ms. Reynolds handed me a trophy, identical to the one Allison had received, along with a certificate and an envelope. "The envelope contains a scholarship to the National Mathematics Summer Institute," she explained quietly. "You've earned it." As I turned to face my schoolmates, trophy in hand, I searched the crowd for Allison, but her usual seat remained empty. The aftermath was both better and worse than I expected. Better because many students and teachers approached me in the days that followed to offer congratulations or apologies. Ms. Jenkins hugged me tight and whispered, "You showed them." My best friend Tanya organized a small celebration. Worse because Allison didn't return to school that week, and when she did, she was a shadow of her former self. Her circle of friends had thinned. Rumors spread that her father had been asked to resign from the Board of Education. I tried to speak with her several times, but she always found a way to avoid me, until one day, about 2 weeks after the second ceremony, when I found her alone in the library, hidden among the stacks in the reference section. She was crying, silent tears tracking down her face as she pretended to read an encyclopedia. I could have walked away. Part of me wanted to, but instead I sat down across from her. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked up, startled, quickly wiping her eyes. "For what? You didn't do anything wrong. That's the whole point, isn't it?" "I'm sorry this happened to both of us," I clarified. "It shouldn't have." Allison closed the book, her fingers tracing the edge of the cover. "My dad lost his position on the board," she said, "and my mom can't show her face at PTA meetings anymore. Everyone thinks we cheated." "Did you know?" I asked quietly. "About the scores?" She shook her head, then hesitated. "Not exactly, but I knew something wasn't right. My practice tests never came close to 98%, but my dad was so proud, and my mom was planning this big celebration, and I wanted it to be true." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. "What will you do now?" She shrugged, a small defeated gesture. "My parents are talking about moving, starting fresh somewhere else." She looked at me directly for the first time. "Was it worth it? Turning everything upside down like this?" The question caught me off guard. I'd never thought of it that way, as if standing up for the truth was somehow causing trouble rather than addressing it. "It wasn't just about me," I said finally. "Ms. Reynolds said there were other students whose scores were changed too, people who never even knew they were being cheated." Allison was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think I was special," she said finally, "that I was meant for great things. Now I don't know what I am." "You're still you," I said. "You're still good at math. You still worked hard. None of that changed." She gave me a sad smile. "But it's not enough, is it? Not on its own." I didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence for a while, two 12-year-old girls carrying burdens that felt too heavy for our young shoulders. I hope wherever you go next, they see you, I said finally. The real you. She nodded and I left her there among the books, thinking that some victories don't feel like victories at all. The summer came, bringing with it the National Mathematics Summer Institute. I spent 6 weeks on a college campus with other students who loved numbers as much as I did. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere, understood without having to explain myself. When I returned home, bronzed by the summer sun and bursting with new knowledge, I learned that Allison's family had indeed moved away. No one seemed to know where they'd gone, or if they did, they didn't say. Principal Davis had also departed, taking early retirement. The new principal, Dr. Harper, was a woman with silver-streaked hair and a reputation for fairness. Life went on. I entered 7th grade with a new confidence, not just in my abilities but in my right to be recognized for them. The math trophy sat on a shelf in my bedroom, not as a symbol of triumph, but as a reminder that truth matters, even when it's difficult. Ms. Jenkins became my mentor, pushing me toward competitions and opportunities I might not have considered before. The world needs more girls like you in STEM, she'd say. Girls who don't back down. My parents watched my growing confidence with pride, though sometimes I'd catch my mother looking at me with a hint of worry in her eyes. What? I asked her, once, when I caught that look. I just wish it had been easier for you, she said. That you could have just been a child, enjoying your victory, not fighting for recognition. It made me stronger, I told her, believing it. I know, baby, she said, smoothing my hair. But you were already strong. The years passed. High school brought new challenges, new competitions, new victories, most of them straightforward, some of them not. I learned to navigate a world that didn't always make space for me, to create that space for myself when necessary. After graduation, I attended MIT on a full scholarship, majoring in applied mathematics. College was liberating, a place where ideas mattered more than backgrounds, where I could finally just be a mathematician rather than a black female mathematician, or so I thought, until my junior year when I applied for a prestigious internship at a quantitative investment firm. My credentials were impeccable. Perfect GPA, published research, glowing recommendations. But the position went to a less qualified candidate whose father happened to be a major donor to the university. The old feelings came rushing back, the injustice, the frustration, the sense of being seen as less than I was. But this time, I knew what to do. I gathered evidence, built my case methodically, and presented it to the department chair. The result was a review of the internship selection process, and eventually, the creation of a new position for me. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. Throughout my career, I carried the lessons of that middle school math competition with me, not just the math itself, but the harder lessons about standing your ground, about having the receipts, about making people see you even when they'd rather look away. 20 years after that rainy day in Principal Davis's office, I found myself back in my hometown. I'd accepted a position as a visiting professor at the local university, wanting to give back to the community that had shaped me. My first weekend back, I decided to visit the farmers market downtown, a tradition from my childhood. The morning was crisp, autumn leaves crunching underfoot as I wandered among stalls of fresh produce and homemade goods. At a stand, selling handmade pottery, I reached for a blue ceramic mug at the same time as another woman. Our hands brushed, and we both pulled back. "I'm sorry," she said. "You take it." Something in her voice made me look up sharply. Older, certainly, with lines around her eyes and streaks of gray in her blonde hair, but unmistakable all the same. Allison. Her eyes widened in recognition, then uncertainty. Zora Williams. We stood there, two women in our 30s, the years between us suddenly compressed into nothing. "I heard you were back in town," she said finally. "Someone mentioned you're teaching at the university now." I nodded. "Just for a year. I'm usually based in Boston. What about you?" "What? Brought you back?" She gestured to the pottery stand. "These are mine, actually. I moved back about 5 years ago to take care of my mom. She has Alzheimer's. I teach art at the community center and sell these on weekends. I looked at the pottery with new interest. Delicate, geometric patterns etched into clay, mathematical in their precision. They're beautiful, I said sincerely. Thanks. She handed me the blue mug. Please, take it. As a welcome back gift. I accepted it, turning it in my hands. How have you been, Allison? Really? She sighed, looking past me at the busy market. It was hard for a long time. After we moved, my parents divorced. My dad, well, he had some issues that went beyond what happened at Jefferson. My mom and I started over, just the two of us. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Don't be. It made me figure out who I really was without all the expectations. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Turns out I was never meant to be a mathematician. Art was always my true love, but my father wouldn't hear of it, said there was no future in it. I thought about parallel lives, about the paths we take and the ones forced upon us. And you, she asked, did you become everything you were meant to be? The question was earnest, without a trace of bitterness. I think so, I said. I love my work. It challenges me every day. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Good. You deserved that. You always did. A customer approached her. Stand. And Allison turned to help them. I waited, the mug still in my hands, feeling like our conversation wasn't quite finished. When the customer left, Allison turned back to me. Listen, I know this might seem strange, but would you want to get coffee sometime? I've thought about you over the years, about what happened. I think I owe you a proper conversation. I was surprised by the offer, but even more surprised by my immediate desire to accept. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and as I turned to leave, she called after me. Zora, I want you to know, I'm glad you fought for the truth back then. It hurt at the time, but in the end it set us both free in different ways. Walking away from the market, blue mug carefully wrapped in paper, I thought about truth and consequences, about how standing up for what's right isn't always neat or simple. Sometimes it hurts people, even people who don't deserve to be hurt. Sometimes it takes years to understand the full impact of our actions. But I also thought about how that moment of injustice had shaped me, had given me the tools to navigate a world that wouldn't always recognize my worth on its own. How it had taught me to carry my evidence, to know my value, even when others questioned it. The following week, Allison and I met at a small cafe near the university. She arrived first, waving to me from a corner table, 2 steaming mugs already waiting. I hope you don't mind, she said as I sat down. I remembered you always had hot chocolate at the school events. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. Thank you. I haven't had proper hot chocolate in ages. We talked easily, filling in the gaps of our lives. Allison had married briefly in her 20s, divorced amicably, no children. She'd found her calling in art therapy, working with children and elderly patients, including her mother. And you? She asked. Family? Engaged, I said, smiling. He's a physicist. We're figuring out the two-body problem, how to have 2 academic careers without living apart. The eternal struggle, she laughed. Then her expression grew more serious. Can I ask you something? Something I've wondered for years. I nodded, curious. How did you know? That you deserved more, that you could fight for it and win. I considered the question, stirring my hot chocolate. My parents, I think. They never let me believe that I was worth less than anyone else. And they showed me that when something is wrong, you don't just accept it. You work to change it. Allison was quiet for a moment. I wish I'd had that. My father always taught me that the world works a certain way, and smart people find ways to make that system work for them, even if it means bending the rules. It took me years to unlearn that. It's never too late, I said. No, it isn't. She reached into her bag and pulled out a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. I kept this all these years. It was an article about the math competition controversy, with a photo of me receiving the trophy at the second ceremony. The headline read, "Truth prevails in state math competition." Why? I asked, genuinely puzzled. Because it was the first time I saw that the system could be wrong, that authority figures weren't always right. It was transformative, in a way. Even though it was painful, we fell into a thoughtful silence. Outside the cafe window, students rushed to classes, their lives still unfolding, still full of possibilities and pitfalls. "I have a favor to ask," Allison said suddenly. "The community center where I teach, we're always looking for speakers to inspire the kids. Many of them come from challenging backgrounds. Would you consider coming to talk about your work? About perseverance?" The request surprised me, but I found myself nodding. "I'd be honored." She smiled, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you. These kids, they need to see someone who broke through, who didn't take no for an answer." As we parted ways outside the cafe, Allison hugged me, a brief, warm embrace that bridged decades of separation. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "Full circle in a way." "Full circle," I agreed. Walking back to my office, I thought about that 12-year-old girl, clutching her proof of excellence, determined to be seen. How she could never have imagined this moment, standing tall in her truth, extending a hand to others still finding theirs. Life has a way of testing us, of presenting the same lessons in new forms until we truly learn them. That childhood injustice had prepared me for a lifetime of standing my ground, of knowing my worth, of carrying my receipts. But perhaps the most important lesson was one I was still learning, that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, but in how you help others heal from the war. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone else seemed to doubt you? Or have you been on the other side, realizing later that you were part of a system that wasn't fair to someone else? I'd love to hear your perspective on how you would have handled being in my shoes, or even in Allison's. Sometimes our hardest moments shape us in ways we never expect. If you know someone who's facing an uphill battle for recognition, someone who might need a reminder that their truth matters, please share this story with them. Sometimes just knowing that others have walked a similar path can make all the difference. And remember, carry your receipts, know your worth, and never be afraid to stand in your truth, even when the world tries to tell you that you're wrong.